So, Leagues 5 has a bit of a problem. If you've seen any of the announcement recently, you've probably heard a lot of discussion about how Kandarin is dead. Nobody should pick it. It's basically lost all of its value, and you would be a complete idiot to go to like the worst region ever for Leagues. And don't get me wrong, I probably agree it's looking like the worst region right now. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Kandarin just because it has been one of my favorite regions in the past. I played it in Leagues 2, I played it in Leagues 4, and I guess I wanted to talk about why Kandarin is feeling so weak right now and what its big strengths have been in the past that have made it such a popular pick. So let's kind of go through the timeline of Kandarin's rise and fall. You still got Mistalin and Karumja, but there were only 7 more zones for you to pick from, and you got 3 options. Zaya had been released by now, but the very first league, Twisted League, was centered around you're completely isolated to just Zaya. So of these regions, Wilderness had very little content at the time. Fremennik was also seen as a pretty boring region. I think there was really only Vorkath and like Dagannoth Kings. Tyrannwyn didn't even have Bofa yet, but the Blowpipe in its unnerfed state was like a really big draw for a lot of people. However, having to supply the darts made the desert feel kind of required, and the desert was down horrendous. There was like nothing to do there, no Temporos, no Tombs of a Masket, like there were barely any tasks at all. You were like just killing the Kalphite Queen, okay? It was really bad. And so I think naturally everybody kind of gravitated to this setup of Kandarin, Asgarnia, and Mauritania. Mauritania had the only raid available, and with the Scythe being the only mega rare available, kind of made sense that everybody would focus on a melee setup that used the power of Kandarin and Asgarnia to fuel the engine. And it absolutely showed in the numbers. You can see here, Kandarin, Asgarnia, and Mauritania well above any of the other regions, and Kandarin had almost twice the amount of people as second place. Like, it was by far the most popular region, bar none. Now in Leagues 4, when they returned to the Trailblazer format, the desert had just released Tombs of a Maskin, so I think a lot of people were naturally drawn there. Getting to use a juiced up shadow was really appealing, and the numbers kind of showed for it. And in a similar fashion, Kandarin became a great supporting region for the desert. Occult Necklace at 10% magic damage and Tormented Bracelet at 5% just felt too good to pass up for most people. And again, the popularity speaks for itself. Kandarin even beat out Zaya, which was making its first appearance in the Trailblazer format. So what is happening, and why are people just doomsaying about Kandarin so hard this year? Well, for one, there were already changes just made to RuneScape as a whole that just made the region worse, mainly in the form of hitting the Occult Necklace from 10% to 5%. And there were other changes like Dwarf Cannon being auto-completed, so now Asgarnia just had access to the Dwarf Cannon. You didn't also need Kandarin there as well. While I think it's been a great support region for the last 2 leagues, I feel like a lot of people were just getting kind of sick of it. It really lacks any kind of interesting content as you get further into the league. And it's also had some of the worst tasks in leagues, like doing 2,000 monkey laps at Apatol agility course. But I really feel like people were just sick of Kandarin, and at this point looking for like any reason not to pick Kandarin. And oh boy, did we get some this season. The Echo item announcement really shook up the meta in a lot of zones. And while many people were speculating that Kandarin would receive a Tribrid necklace because it does give you the Anguish, the Torment, and the Occult Necklace, it's actually Fremennik that got not only the Tribrid Amulet, but also the Tribrid Ring, and it is significantly better than any other options in the game. So now, why even bother going to Kandarin just to get Zenites when these items are just so much better? Next, we saw the Grimoire Relic announced, which actually gives you all of the prayers regardless of your area choices. And just like with Ruinous Powers before, this made it so that Kandarin is no longer required to get the effect of Piety. And just this morning, we saw combo item drops changed. So the Amulet of Rancor from Mauritania no longer needs a Torture. Alchemical Hydra drops the Dragon Hunter Lance. You don't need Kandarin anymore. And even Zulrah will drop an uncharged Toxic Trident. You don't actually need a Trident anymore from the Kraken. There's already just not a lot of uniques in Kandarin, and I feel like just looking at this, like, it feels pretty bad. Now, they did leave out like the Zenites and stuff like that, but again, if you want Zenites, why not just go to Fremennik and just get the better jewelry anyways? Maybe the Echo item will save Kandarin. Oh, no, it's completely garbage. Everybody thinks this thing is awful. It's the worst one. Why would you ever pick an elemental weakness one when like half the monsters, even in that zone, don't have an elemental weakness, right? Like, who cares? And so I think a lot of people are writing off Kandarin and, waiting for some magic revelation that will somehow save this region. And like, I know I called this video coping about Kandarin, But guys, I don't feel like people understand the value that Kandarin has outside of those items, and a really big reason of why it was so beneficial in previous leagues. And that's just because Kandarin is not really that dense in challenging content, which makes it one of the best regions for points and also one of the easiest regions to choose first and kind of get your start going. Just take a look at some of these quests that you'll have access to if Kandarin's your first region. Waterfall Quest, Monk's Friend, Sea Slug, Fight Arena, Fishing Contest, Elemental Workshop. These are all quests that people do very early on in their accounts to absolutely skyrocket through the early levels. And I know what you're thinking, okay, it's 8 times experience. Who cares about doing Waterfall and getting to level 50 attack and strength? Like 8 times experience is still 8 times experience for the quest rewards. It's still saving you a lot of time and really accelerating you early. Remember that you can be in your first region within like the first hour of starting leagues. So instead of grinding skilling, you could just be knocking these out and just getting insane amounts of experience. And even later on, quests like the Path of Gluffrey, this thing gives an insane amount of experience. It's a very, very easy quest. And that all gets multiplied by, your XP multiplier at the time. It's also just got like some of the easiest tasks in the entire game. Most of these have you questing, which you're going to want to do anyways, or just have very low requirements, if any requirements at all. And Kandarin especially has a big emphasis towards skilling early on, whereas some of the other regions have like a lot more combat to do when you might not have access to some of your stronger combat relics or combat masteries. Now, do I think like completing Sins of the Father or like creating the shortcut, like are these like super hard tasks? Not really. But I mean, like compare them to Kandarin, where you have to like kill a Kraken, complete Path of Gluffrey, do the Seers course. I mean, like half of these take you less than 5 minutes. Honestly, if you have the skill requirements, they're really not that hard at all. Okay, well, isn't the problem with Kandarin that all of its really hard tasks suck? And I mean, not really. A lot of these are very easy as well. 150 red chins is really not that hard. Kandarin has a lot of hotspots for Hunter and Magic, so it naturally will go really well with Animal Wrangler. And I know last year, people with Trickster were able to get a lot of these early agility-based tasks completed and a lot of the thieving-based tasks as well, which is like a lot easier than like growing your own redwood or chopping 500 redwood logs. Like that's going to take you a little bit longer, Now listen, monkey laps suck, but that's already being changed. Same thing with Chompies. Those tasks are being diminished because they take way too long. But even ignoring that, like how many people are actually doing Grandmaster tasks in their region? Like, let's be honest, okay? 10% of people equipped all Zenyte jewelry, which is really not that hard to do if you're killing demonic gorillas anyways. But then we go to Zaya and like, look at this. 5% of people got a twisted bow, 2% got an ancestral set, and like 0.1% did all the combat achievements, okay? Like, I mean, come on. Yeah, monkey laps suck, but like who is actually doing all the Chambers of Xeric combat achievements? At least you could grind this out if you really wanted to. Like, I could never complete the Sepulchre in 6.5 minutes because there's no relic that helps me get better at doing that course. Like you can see, Tyrannwyn, always considered a pretty weak region, and look at that, its Grandmaster tasks have really high completion rates. I'm not saying that you should only care about points, but like that is a pretty big part of leagues, is actually acquiring points and progressing through the game. And some of these bad zones are often the best for points. Like, do you really want to burn yourself out by picking a whole bunch of raids and then just never getting any of the tasks done because they take so much longer to grind out? And if you hate the content in Kandarin, I totally get it. Like, you should pick regions that you find fun, but having that early game engine of a zone is just really helpful for the rest of your leagues, and you can spend more time doing the content that you actually do want to do. You don't spend a lot of time in Kandarin. And I feel like if there weren't so many people who went with Kandarin in previous leagues and are looking for any reason to not go there, this would still be seen as like a very nice support region, especially for somebody who might not have a lot of time, might not have a ton of PVM experience, and just wants like a more chill zone to supplement their other choices. So where does that leave us with actually creating a build? How can we make the Devil's Element work? Like, a lot of people have been exploring what kind of magic options can we do? How can we exploit elemental weaknesses to do a bunch of damage? So I said, fuck it, let's go melee. And I mean that quite literally, FKT. Why melee? That's because it's really easy right now to imagine yourself picking Grimoire and not imagine passing up on what Grimoire is up against. We have no idea what the other options in that tier are. And Piety is a pretty significant upgrade to your melee damage. And that's what I think the Devil's Element actually shines at. I don't think that it's intended to be built around, but rather to supplement what other stuff you're doing. Melee has always struggled with being able to deal with bosses that are immune to melee, and that's a big reason why Tyrannwyn has always been seen as a really bad zone for melee, because you can't hit Zulrah. Well, guess what? Zulrah has fire weakness. Does it really matter if magic isn't your preferred style, if, you'll just be able to use the Devil's Element to shred through your Zulrah kills anyways? And like Corrupted Gauntlet, you don't even bring in any weapons anyways, it's just stats. So as long as you have the skills, like, you can start doing Corrupted Gauntlet. You're not going to be gated by requiring any kind of gear. Crystal Armor paired with the Blade of Saeldor and a Bofa, that should be more than enough to cover you if you want to go to Fremennik and start doing the Dagonoth Kings. After all, even though Kandarin is giving you Zenites, you can still just choose Fremennik anyways and get that better jewelry. It's going to take you a lot longer to kill the Echo Dagonoths than to kill Demonic Gorillas. And here's the really cool part. Now that Duke Succulus no longer requires the desert, you can actually go and start killing him pretty damn early. Everybody will have access to Tormented Demons in Misthalin, so you'll be able to nuke the Duke using that Demonbane weapon. That will grant you the Soul Reaper Axe, which is a perfectly fine melee weapon if you're going for a melee setup with Piety. Then you can combine that with the Crystal Blessing to get the Crystal Armor effect, and you're doing pretty damn good. Are you going to do as much damage as a Mega Rare from a raid? No, probably not. But none of the content you're doing is going to require it. So, does it really matter at the end of the day? Don't like Fremennik because the content there sucks too? Alright, skip it and go to Varlamore instead. You'll still have the Amulet of Torture available from Kandarin. Now you can get the Ultor Ring from Vardorvis, so at least you have something there. And again, you'll get the Soul Reaper Axe by doing Vardorvis. Pretty much everything in Varlamore is pretty weak to melee, so you'll even be able to go have fun doing Fortis Coliseum and taking on Soul. Amoxliaddle and Huicoatl are also weak to the elements. So another good use of your Devil's Element there to kind of shore up some of your weak spots. Okay, screw it. You don't want to go melee. If you're going to go Kandarin, you're going to go magic because Devil's Element is magic. I understand. Well, here's the thing. Kandarin is still one of the best regions for magic. That's right. You guys thought you could get away with it this year. Nope. It is still technically in the best regions for optimal magic damage. Obviously, things can change as we find out more with combat masteries, but theoretically, that's where it's at. Even though the jewelry in Fremennik is insanely good, and it definitely beats the Occult Necklace, there is no glove slot in the entire game that comes close to the Tormented Bracelet at 5% magic damage. And even something like picking Zaya and getting Ancestrals, that's only 3% upgrade over Virtus, which triples with the Shadow to 9% compared to 15% from the Tormented Bracelet. And even Augury, that's just a bonus 2% that doesn't get the Shadow effect, so 11% versus 15%. Now sure, you probably want to get a raid region so you can get your Shadow, so go to the desert instead, and now you can still get the Shadow from the raid, but you'll also have access to Ancient Magics, and you'll also be getting the Fang and the Drygor Blowpipe, which are incredibly accurate weapons that really help a lot when that's not something you're spending a lot of time and focusing a lot of your region choices, is actually having very accurate weapons in the other combat styles. Hate the desert? Alright, well, let's just go Mauritania then instead. Pick up Grimoire if you want anyways, and now you'll still have Ancient Magics over in Mauritania, so you can help out with Nylos at Theater of Blood. Araxor and the Barrows brothers are also weak to elements, so that Devil's Element will come in handy there again. So do you see what I mean? The flexibility here is almost endless. We can kind of keep going around. And obviously, if you want to go for all 3 raids and spend all your time doing PVM, that's perfectly fine. I'm never going to, argue against that. But it is a lot of dense content that I do think tends to burn people out. So I think having a supplemental region like Kandarin is always a good option. Hopefully this kind of helped you take a new look at Kandarin and not just completely count it out. But hey, maybe I am completely coping and this region's actually garbage and you really are an idiot if you pick it. Or maybe there's still something cooking that we just don't know about yet that's going to change people's opinion. I guess that's part of the beauty of League season, and I guess we'll have to wait and see. Until then, I think it's perfectly fine to say farewell to Kandarin for now.
The dungeons are empty, the streets are bare, echoes of battles that no longer care. Rip Kandarin, where light once shone. Now all that remains are the echoes alone. Your legacy fades as we walk away, leaving behind what Jagex could not say.